and you're listening to the Sailing to Success podcast show, where we share practical tips and strategies to help you be more productive, boost your profits, and grow your business. I'm Lyndsay, founder of Smooth Sailing Business Growth, and I'll be your host and captain for this 30-minute excursion. So you're going to hear from guest Nick Loper, host of Side Hustle Show, who's built a huge following for his podcast, and he's going to share with us his success tips and what he calls climbing the listener pyramid. So if you're looking to start a podcast or you're growing your podcast following, you are definitely going to want to listen to this one. So let's set sail. Hey folks, as mentioned, I'm super thrilled of having Nick Loper. So he helps people earn money outside of their day job. He's an author, he's an online entrepreneur. He does guest speaking, and he's the host of the Best Business Podcast nominated Side Hustle Show, which features new part-time business ideas each week. And as chief side hustler at sidehustlenation.com, he, of course, loves deconstructing the tactics and strategies behind building extra income streams. And I was lucky enough to be on a summit with Nick and a couple of other great entrepreneurs. And I mean, he has grown his podcast dramatically. His following is colossal. So, and I loved what he had to say about how to grow a podcast and some great success tips. So I'm really excited at picking your brain, Nick Loper. Welcome to my show.
Let's do it, Lyndsay. Thanks for having me.
You betcha. So why don't we start with talking about, what is Side Hustle Nation and kind of what that means?
Sure. So side hustle, for a quick definition, anything you're doing outside of your day job to earn extra money. Earning extra money never goes out of style. So that's kind of maybe that's a recession-proof business in itself. But really this started as a side project to the main business that I was running at the time, which was a footwear comparison shopping site, super random, which started, of course, as a side hustle to my day job. That was the original side hustle, was selling shoes on the internet, or helping other companies sell shoes on the internet, I should say, and earning an affiliate commission on those sales. But, years and years deep into running this business, always kind of had this diversification play in my mind. Like I want to develop, multiple projects, multiple streams of income. And at the same time, I've been blogging for years, kind of on a personal domain, and nobody ever read it because there's no, coherent theme or anything. There's no reason for anybody to read it unless you personally knew me. And there was kind of this soul searching moment of what do you want to be known for when people Google you? What do you get really excited about talking about? And this lower risk brand of entrepreneurship, this okay, you can start something on the side and slowly build that up. Like that, we kept I couldn't let it die. And so that's kind of where the Side Hustle Nation blog and podcast started, kind of spring of 2013.
I love that. And I read on your site, and I captured this quote because I really liked it. Because your 9 to 5 may make you a living, but your 5 to 9 makes you alive. I love that.
That was on the intro of the podcast for the first 230 episodes.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
I got
I like
this
that.
Fiverr voiceover guy. He's yelling at it. He's like, your 9 to 5 makes you alive. And just but
that's so cool. And it's true. And you know what? I was one of them. I had when my kids were young, I had a part-time job and in a publishing company. And, making a whopping $11 to $14 an hour and, started doing, VA stuff online. And, that was my side hustle, right? Getting that going and then growing it. And then eventually you get to a point where you're burning the candles at both ends. So was your goal to build this, just keep the side hustle going, or to make it where you ditch the day job and your side hustle becomes a full hustle, I guess?
Yeah. So when I was building the shoe business, I definitely had that hope in the back of my mind. And at the very beginning, it probably was more optimistic than it should have been. But hey, I have very little desire to climb the corporate ladder here at work. This could be my thing. This could be my escape path. And it took 3 years of nights and weekends, but it ended up being the escape path. I remember being out to dinner with my boss, and it still took me a couple beers to kind of, build up the nerve to be I'm out, and it was just this huge weight. It was a really exciting time, a really freeing time. And the entrepreneurial roller coaster has been lots of ups and downs since then. Up to that point, like, hey, nothing bad had ever really happened, but it's been kind of lots of challenges since then. But it's been 9 years, and it's I wouldn't trade it. It's been fun.
No, exactly. Yeah, I still remember that moment too, where it's like it's where even when you decide, right, and then you have to tell someone and make that decision, and then it's final, and then it's like you really have to walk the talk. It's like, holy crap.
Like, is this even allowed? Like, I'm going to be in charge of cutting my own paycheck, and I'm going to really put my money where my mouth is and say, yeah, this thing is sustainable. Now that's the advantage of kind of doing it on the side, is you have this track record of earnings history, and you could say, well, for the last 6 months, the average revenue at least covers my expenses or something. A lot of people are out to replace their full day job salary, which is awesome, but maybe a more attainable goal. Hopefully, if you're living below your means, is like, well, if I can cover my expenses, I've got some history. And then given an extra hours a week, I could see how I could get there. I could easily kind of, a recent guest called it getting the ship close to the dock. And I really like that. I really like that phrase. Like, okay, I'm within striking distance of my revenue.
Yeah. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. So how did your podcast, like what made you start your podcast?
Probably peer pressure. I don't know. It was like everybody else was like, you got to do a podcast. iTunes is the future. And a few years before that, everybody was saying the same thing about YouTube and video. Oh, you got to do video. It's like, I definitely don't want to be on video. Like, that sounds horrible. And so I missed the boat on that. I was like, well, I'm going to do a podcast. Like, this seems like no idea the business model, no idea how to do this. No, what I started for less than $100. I think it was a $50 mic, and maybe, I don't even know if I bought any software. Maybe I found like a free Skype recording thing. I watched some free tutorial on like how to set this thing up in iTunes. And even then there was still this inertia of like, well, until you schedule that first interview, nothing is going to happen. You're like, well, that's one of the biggest like realizations of being in kind of the solopreneur, self-employed space. It's like, if something is sitting on your to-do list and it sits there for weeks and weeks, it's like nobody else is going to do that. It's on you to get that done. But
also, no one's going to be on your back about it either.
Yeah,
you can get away with more, I think.
Yeah, there's not a lot of accountability there.
So, did it take a while for you to get your listeners up, or was it just like it went viral right off the cuff, or how did that? I mean, you have a lot of downloads and a lot of followers. How did you get to that point?
It's been a long and slow climb. I think so I launched in May of 2013 and probably had less than 200 downloads like before that month turned over. It was not, this crazy viral overnight hit right out of the gate. What it was in the first 5 episodes, the first 50 episodes, like if I listen back, they're rough, because it's like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to be an interview. You don't know how to sound natural behind the mic. And these are the episodes that I like asked my like personal network, like my friends, to go listen to, download, leave a rating, leave a review in iTunes. And it's just like, oh man, it's embarrassing to think about it now. But when you don't have that audience, like, you kind of have to manufacture one out of the beginning. And the same thing. So I think iTunes works similar to Amazon, similar to Google, similar to Airbnb, similar, all these, similar to Udemy, like all of these kind of like micro search engines, where it's like, if you can give it a little push, then the algorithms start to work in your favor. And I think that's kind of what happened with iTunes. Of course, you want to do, you do your iTunes optimization, right? Like, consider what keywords you want to be searched for in your show title and your author tag and stuff. There's been some evidence that like your description apparently doesn't matter at all, but like your episode titles definitely matter if people are searching for content on specific topics. So there's that element. And then there's the element of like, well, the same thing as launching a blog. Like you're kind of launching into the ether, and if you don't tell anybody about it, nobody's going to know that it's there. So you have to give it that initial push. And so for me, what that looked like was going through my Gmail contacts. Like I had no email list. So I, went through my Gmail contacts, like one by one, like letter by letter, just to see what would pop up in the suggestion.
I remember you saying that. I'm like, that's time consuming, but I mean, it worked.
What was awful about this is like later I discovered so if I'm in Gmail, there's like in the top left corner, there's a little like drop down and it says contacts. So you can like export your contacts into Excel. That would make life a lot easier, but I didn't even know that existed. So I was just like typing like A. Oh, I haven't emailed Aaron in a while, and see what pops up. And saying, hey, what's going on, man? I just launched this new show. You don't even have to listen to it. Every download helps. And just like asking people to go check it out to see if you could spike those numbers a little bit. And it was off to the races.
Nice. And I think there's a valuable lesson in there. And you were saying, how you go back to your first few podcasts and that they were rough. And it's like, God, if I almost feel like I need to re-invite those first few guests back because they kind of got a raw deal being my newbies.
And we should re-record this.
I know, right? It's like, and you have to start somewhere, and you can do it on a shoestring budget, right? And just know that your first few they might suck, and it's not the end of the world. They get better, you get more comfortable, you grow listeners organically. And I just, it can be scary, but you have to start somewhere.
Do you ever, on the blogging side, have you ever gone through like the content audit process where you delete, content that's not relevant, or you kind of combine stuff that, would be better served as like an ultimate resource versus, onesie twosie posts? I
have never done that.
So this is like an SEO play, right? It's like, if I can consolidate my resources on the blogging front, I don't want to dilute my, SEO juice across 500 posts. If only 200 of them are like really good or do anything for me, but it's like, so I've deleted hundreds of posts from the site, but I can never delete a podcast. It's like part of the archive forever, because it would look weird. Like, hey, what happened to episode 3? It's like, it's all part of the canon there.
That's part of your journey, right?
Yes.
And there's, I just figure there's value in every episode. You may listen to it and cringe and think, oh, I don't know if that's the best one. But it's like, and especially like you and I, we interview, great people, and they all have value. They all have amazing tips and strategies to share, and someone's going to get something out of it, So
yeah. And the exciting thing is, you probably get these notes too. It's like people going back, oh man, I just discovered your show. I binge listened from the beginning. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's dedication. I'm sorry.
That's awesome.
But it's like, so those first few episodes, nobody was listening at the time, but now they've got thousands and thousands of downloads, which is pretty cool.
That is a great point. Now I know you're a great speaker, and you spoke at Podcast Movement, and you've got some more coming up, and you spoke about climbing the listener pyramid. What does that mean?
So for a podcaster, this is your Mount Everest. This is, the ascension that you want to kind of take listeners on. And actually it starts before listeners. So the base of the pyramid is strangers. And that's the biggest part of the pyramid, because most people have never heard of you. And most people statistically haven't even heard of a podcast, which is cool, because it's like, there's nowhere to go but up. That's one of the reasons I'm excited about the medium in general. Because like once people discover it, if they're anything like me, man, they're hooked. It's like, okay, what else is out there?
Yeah.
So strangers at the bottom of the pyramid, listeners on tier 2, you got them, you're in their earbuds, you got people to tune in. That's fantastic. After that, you have subscribers, and you have fans at the very top of the pyramid, and trying to work your way up that pyramid and trying to convert strangers into listeners, into subscribers, into fans.
I love that. And because I don't know if other people think this, but to me, it's like, okay, you want to hook people to get listeners, and then, you eventually want to get them into your sphere and your e-list somehow and have some call to action. But it's hard. I mean, there's so many listeners out there that you have no idea who they are. You have no idea where they are. It's hard to make that connection. But I like the thought of having strangers obviously attract listeners, get them to subscribe, but also to make them into fans. I've never really thought of it that way before.
Yeah. The fans are the people who are, listening to every minute of every episode. They're opening all your emails. They're buying your product. They're like kind of the early beta testers for your products. They're on the launch team for your, book releases and stuff. Like they're advocates for you, and they advocate for you to their friends, like to other people. Hey, you got to check this out. You got to check out this, you won't believe what I just heard, right? That's what's cool. And so we talked about kind of like the direct outreach form of marketing. If you don't have an email list, well, you probably got like years and years of email history or contact history, right? That can be an email list. Your Facebook friends can be a makeshift email list. Don't spam everybody all at once. Your LinkedIn contacts can be an email list. So that's kind of one way to go about it. Even a friend of mine, Steve Young, hosts a show called App Masters. And when he started, it was called Mobile App Chat back in the day, but he landed this like big name interview for him. He was like the co-founder of Shazam. So he tells me this story about like, doing all this outreach, like pestering this guy on Twitter, like trying to get him on the show, finally lands the interview. And he's like, well, this was a really great episode. I can't just sit on it and kind of wait for something to happen. So he like proactively crawls the Google Play apps for email addresses for the top 300 app developers and sends them all a one-on-one message. Look, hey, I don't have anything to sell you. All I want you to do is go check out this episode. I just interviewed the co-founder of Shazam. We talked about, point 1, 2, and 3, on how to grow your app business, whatever it is. And for one, it was like, the level of hustle required to do that.
Seriously,
but
right?
It kind of, I imagine it kind of stood out in the clutter for these developers' inboxes to say like, oh man, this guy's sending me a one-on-one email with no ask other than to go listen to this free podcast. Like, I guess I should check it out.
Well, curiosity, if nothing else, right?
Yeah. So I really liked that, kind of that direct outreach, build your own email list from, you probably have a bigger audience than you give yourself credit for out of the gate. We'll phrase it that way. And we talked a little bit about the iTunes optimization, just being cognizant of the keywords that you're targeting. So I want to rank for terms like side hustle. I want to rank for terms like business ideas and stuff like that versus, if you nowadays like have decent Google rankings as well. But when I'm starting out, I don't have any of those either, but iTunes is a smaller search engine and a much simpler search engine to play in as well.
I know. So in other words, I love the what not to do's. What's the worst title that you've seen?
Gosh, I did an interview and dutifully the guy sends me, hey, your episode is live today. Thanks so much for joining me. Here's a link to check it out. I click on it and it's like 33 Nick Loper. Yeah. I'm like, well, why? Who is going to listen to this? Who cares? Like, what's in it for me? Yes. What's in it for me? What keyword? What am I going to learn? Who's this for? And so trying to be, because that's what got me hooked on podcasting initially. I clicked a link from Twitter or Facebook or someplace and remember being like physically upset when I realized I'm like scrolling through this what turned out to be the show notes page and being like, oh, this is audio. Like you whatever you promised in the headline, you buried 40 minutes deep into this MP3 file. And it was like pre-smartphone. So I could figure out how to get this thing onto my device. But once I did, I was hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like all of a sudden, every dog walk, every trip to the gym, every car ride,
so easy.
Like, oh, I could be learning, this is fantastic. I'm just like eating this stuff up. And I think for a lot of people, especially people who are new to the medium, like you have the chance to be their introduction. Yeah. And that is really, really cool.
I agree. And it's, and I kind of set you up for that answer on someone saying episode 21 in your name. It's like, I see that sometimes and I just cringe. Or even when people on social, hey, my new episode's out, check it out. And it's like, there's no hook. There's no,
what's it about?
I know. It drives me crazy. Now,
that's where I start.
Drive you crazy?
Yeah, that's where I kind of start the episode creation process now is what's the hook? If I can't come up with like the title or the, what's the compelling reason like that, it makes it so much harder to record. And you get pitches and you probably get them too. It's like, I would love to come on and tell my story. It's like, well, that's great. And I'm sure it's an amazing story, but like, why should people tune into that? And trying to structure the conversation around those takeaways and stuff like that's been helpful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I mean, there are some podcasts that are just stories, but that's their angle, right? Where it's like, for me, I like my podcast to have concrete, inspirational tips or strategies that they can take home, or even concepts, right? That just move you forward in your business or your marketing.
Right.
So going back to, strangers, to listeners, to subscribers, to fans, at which level is the hardest? Which conversion, I guess you could say?
That's a good question. Getting somebody who's never listened to a podcast before to like figure out iTunes, how to figure out how to download your thing like that, there's a little bit of maybe a cultural or a habitual hurdle to overcome there. I normally listen to morning talk radio in the car, or I normally listen to music in the car. Like, I normally drive in silence. So that might be the biggest hurdle to overcome, because once you get somebody in the door, I don't know. I think it's easier it's the biggest advantage that you have as a podcaster is being able to tap into word of mouth. And we can talk about Pinterest tactics and Instagram tactics, all this, SEO, iTunes SEO and stuff. But really the most overlooked, tactic of podcast marketing is just word of mouth. And it comes down to making something that's worthy of being shared. That's too good. That's too good not to be shared. The one I'm obsessed with lately is Hardcore History. You ever listen to this guy's show?
Oh, no.
So he was one of the keynote speakers at Podcast Movement, and people had recommended his show, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, for years, but I never listened to it because I would look it up and be like, 5 hours for an episode? You got to be kidding me.
Holy Hannah, seriously? 5 hours?
Yeah. And I'm 13 hours deep or something into the history of World War I. It's like this 6-part epic saga. And I'm hooked. I can't wait to get in the car, because I know it's like, okay, I'm going to get, and he's such a good storyteller, and he weaves all this stuff in. I have no idea how much of this is scripted versus off the cuff, but it's like, crazy. It's really, really well done. And he's got, millions and millions of listeners, but he checks the box. It's too good not to share, because here I am to share.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's almost like a book on tape, so to speak, if he's a great storyteller. And but you've got me intrigued, because I do like history.
Yeah, check it out. I mean, the blueprint for Armageddon, the World War I series is, because what you get in history class is like, oh, they shot some guy in the Balkans, and then there's a bunch of trenches over here, and then there were some Australians, over in Turkey, and like that's all you get. And then America comes in, and but he's like going into the trenches, like really into the details, cool. Like, and trying to like put yourself
paint a picture.
It's horrifying and fascinating all at once. Right.
Almost like a movie, but in audio.
Yeah. Really, really cool stuff. So there's an example of something too good to ignore. Pat Flynn, I think, is an example. Some of his episodes really check the box for me, where it's like, especially if it's a business model that you haven't heard of, and you end up forwarding it to half a dozen friends. Like, you got to check this out. This is going to make you money. You should totally do this. Like, stuff like that really works. There's, I don't know, you're north of Toronto. Are you a baseball fan?
Not really.
Not really.
We're hard Maple Leaf fans,
I was gonna say, it's got to be. It's already hockey season. Yeah. Whether or not you're a baseball fan, this is like a really funny episode of a show called The Dollop. It's like a comedy podcast. They find this picture. I don't know if they're just like reading off his Wikipedia page or what, but they find this pitcher from like 1900 who was a really good pitcher, but really a crazy dude. Like, they tell stories about him like chasing fire trucks that would drive past the stadium, and fans would bring puppies into the stands to like try and distract him. He's just like he'd wrestle alligators or something in the off season. Like, a hilarious episode about this dude. And so I tell that story too, because I was like, I went, as soon as I listened to it, I, sent it to half a dozen other people. Like, you gotta check this out.
I know. I like those comedy ones, I have to say. A friend of mine, Jessica Rhodes, she has started one with her partner in crime there, Margie. And so it's woman-splaining. I'm like, that's hilarious.
Okay.
I haven't listened to it yet, but because it's pretty new. But yeah, so you got to have some humor in some of them sometimes, right?
I like it.
And the cool thing about podcasting is there's something for everyone out there. So it's like, and just to niche, don't be afraid to niche down on something really specific.
Right. It's a whole show about, gosh, what was the one?
There are some strange podcasts out there.
In a couple weeks on the Side Hustle show, this dude has built a 5-figure a month business podcasting about air conditioning training, like how to become an HVAC tech. And it's like, he's got sponsors, the whole night. He's got a huge Facebook following. This is Brian Orr from, what's the name of the podcast? HVAC School Podcast.
Yeah. I know a lot of people in that sphere, so I was kind of interested to see if I knew the name. Yeah, I know. You think, really, that could take off? That's a thing? But yeah, there's something for everyone.
It's something for everyone.
Now, I'd like to dig in a little bit on converting. So, you've moved people from strangers to listeners. You've got some great downloads. What are a couple of great ways to convert them to your e-list or convert them to subscribers? Do you have any couple of strategies that have really worked well for you?
So the one that best for me is a content upgrade strategy, which is basically saying, hey, you listen to this episode, but wait, there's more. You can get the action item checklist. You can get the extended audio version. Hey, after we hit the record button or after we hit the stop button, we had a 10-minute bonus round. The cheat sheet. So what I do is like the episode summary, basically write up kind of not a full transcript, but kind of like, here's the highlights of what we talked about and stuff like that. That's been working really well, really, for the last 3 years.
Awesome.
It took 63 episodes to figure out that, look, this is not going to be a business on its own. It's a content marketing channel. Yeah. And when I started treating it as such, that really helped move things along. So I think in the first 14 months, you had an email list of 1,000 at that point, which I was happy with. Hey, 1,000 people volunteered to hear from me. That's cool. But after implementing the content upgrade strategy on the podcast, within 3 months, it was 3,000. Within 6 months, it was 6,000. So really kind of was the inflection point for the business. And what it sounds like in practice is like, hey, you can find the notes and links for this episode at, blah, blah, blah URL. While you're there, you can download the free PDF highlight reel summary of the episode. Look, you don't have to take notes. We did it for you. Whatever pitch, it's got all of my guest top tips from this conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad it worked really well for you. I know it's worked really well for a couple of clients of mine. I don't know why I haven't done it yet. It's just not enough time.
I was going to ask you, do something similar?
I haven't. I've done a couple of content upgrades for blogs, but I haven't for podcasts.
Well, now if you're a blogger and you're listening to this, one of the most surprising and easiest content upgrades to do, especially if you have a really long post, like 4,000 plus words, hey, would you like a PDF version of this post? It's going to take you a while to read. Why don't you save it for later?
Right.
And it's crazy.
That is easy.
It's just, copy and paste the stuff into Word and, format it so it looks nice and you're good to go. And I've been always surprised with how many people take me up on that.
Yeah, that's nice. Great tips. And are there any tips for making, you've got a bunch of listeners. How do you make them raving fans, or is it anything that you even have control over?
Well,
people either love you or they don't, I guess.
In a lot of ways, it's like self-selecting. People can just tune out if they don't want to. But a couple things that come to mind is probably consistency. I swear I had another C. It was going to be like CCR, like Credence.
Cool.
It was going to be consistent. Probably, I forget what the other C was, but consistency and results really are the two main components. Like, what result that people get from listening to you? Is it education? Is it entertainment? Is it, they're going to make more money in their business? Like that's really the result that I'm aiming to deliver for people, is the emails that come back and say, I listened to this episode, I took action, and I've already made $500, or I've already landed 3 clients, or, whatever it is, I've already doubled my traffic, stuff like that. Really, really rewarding for me. Like that's, okay, I know, because it's such an anonymous medium, who's anybody out there listening? But like when you get those kind of notes back, okay, people are listening, people are taking action. That's really cool. So that's kind of on the results side, like what's the outcome that somebody ought to get from listening to this. And then on the consistency standpoint, I mean that from both the publishing, publishing schedule, like, hey, we're going to do a weekly show. It comes out every Thursday at this time, or, whatever schedule that works for you. I don't think you need to go crazy and do like a 5-day a week type of thing, but the consistency in scheduling, because it's a taking a page out of, TV's playbook, where it's every weeknight at whatever time, like this is my show comes on. And so it's like you kind of build yourself into people's drive times, into people's weekly routines, which is, a really powerful place to be. Like at this point, if I missed an episode, I have a feeling people would send me a note, like, what's going on? Whereas if I missed a blog post, like, nobody's going to be like, hey dude, where are you? But there are people,
you've got a loyal following, right? That
people are like, oh, every Thursday, I'm looking forward. And the other piece of consistency is in the content itself. And you don't need to be a machine and to kind of ask the same questions every single time, but there's like on the radio show that I grew up listening to in Seattle, it's like every morning getting ready for school, they had like this 10-question trivia game. And it was called Beat the Producer. And, it was going to come on at 7:40 every morning. And then after that, they're going to do traffic. And after that, they're going to do the news. And then, so just kind of like, it was part of the rhythm of it. And I think you can do the same thing on your show with, the language that you use to introduce the show, the language that you use to ask people to download the content upgrade, the language that you use to introduce a sponsor. And there's an element of that kind of becomes a familiarity. One of the shows that does really well with this, not necessarily from like a language and verbiage standpoint, but from like an inside joke standpoint, is the Fizzle Show, which is like a, entrepreneurial community, kind of like, how to start your thing on the side, where they have all these like inside jokes where it's like, if it's your first time listening, you're kind of like, these guys are goofy. But if it's your 10th or 100th time listening, you're in on it. And then that makes you feel like you're part of the cool kids. And so it's like a balance, because every episode is going to be somebody's first time listening to you, but it's also going to be somebody's 10th or 100th time. And so there's a balance. It's a balance there.
That's cool. You've given us some really great tips, and you're so right on the consistency. I've seen so many podcasters that have started and they're like, oh, I didn't get a sale from it after 2 months. I'm bailing. I'm like, what? But yeah, it is a long game, right? And, you've started, you've been consistent, you've seen results, you've tweaked it. And it didn't happen overnight, and that's okay. That's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah. It's like 4 years into this journey, and it's become, it's a lot like Cal Newport's, not Deep Pork. What was his older one? So Good They Can't Ignore You, where it's like, hey, don't start a business around your passions, start a business around a skill, and then that'll become a passion over time. So although I didn't necessarily have a skill for podcasting at the beginning either, but it became a passion over time, because you saw results from it. It ended up being fun. It's kind of turned into my art, my craft, like each week, like to edit and structure the show in a way that you want to make it a tight listening experience. Like it's become a passion of mine over the last 4 years.
Awesome. And kudos to you. So do you think you'll be doing it still for the next 4 years?
I'd love to be doing it for the next 4 years. It's weird to think about that.
You still love it? Like you still love it?
Yeah. I mean, this is like the highlight of my week. Like Thursday is podcast day. It's a challenge to kind of, try and continually stepping up the game. Yeah. The only thing that's weird about it is, the work I was doing 5 years ago would be unrecognizable to the work that I'm doing today
Mm-hmm.
and the work I was doing 5 years before that. So it's hard to kind of extrapolate out into the future.
True.
But if life allows me to continue, I'd love to keep it going.
Awesome. Good for you. And thank you so much for sharing all your success tips. And yeah, I'm sure you will kick some more butt as you move on over the next number of years. Who knows what you'll do?
Who knows?
Imagine how many followers you'll have then. Holy Hannah, Batman.
Oh, scary to think about. It's all
Awesome. Well, I'm so happy that we can learn from your successes and the different pointers. And again, I loved how you talked about the climbing the listener pyramid. I know when we were on that summit, that just really resonated with me. So I'm really thrilled to be able to share that with my listeners. Thank you for that.
Thanks for having me, Lyndsay.
Awesome. So that's it today, folks, for this episode of Sailing to Success podcast show. Of course, you can find this episode and others along with my videos and blogs at lyndsayphillips.com. And of course, if you are looking to start your own podcast or outsource some of the podcast production, you can go to smoothbusinessgrowth.com. Start here. And so I wish you all a profitable and productive week, and may the winds always be at your back.